Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing all my top tips for starting a blog. So if you're new to my YouTube channel, you might not know that I'm actually a full-time blogger. I just do YouTube for fun on the side. But because I've been blogging for so long, coming up on my 9.5 years of blogging, I get so many questions about how to start a blog. And I try to remind people that I started my blog in 2008 and things were a little bit different back then. But there's still some stuff that I have learned over the years that would be helpful for starting a blog right now. Okay, so my first tip, it's gonna sound so dumb when I say it, but I hope you guys just hear me out on this, and that is to just start. If you want to get a blog off the ground, the best thing and the only thing that you can really do is to just get going. And I know a lot of people want things to be just right and just perfect, but the reality is that you need to get going, and you're gonna learn things along the way. And the only way to get started is to actually sit down and just go for it. Don't worry about things being perfect. Frankly, there's going to be no one reading your blog at the beginning, which is amazing because that means you have a lot of time to just sort through and work out the details and really just get in the habit of writing it. I think I see a lot of people starting blogs, and the biggest thing that I see happening over and over again is that they get super excited the first 2 weeks and then they lose steam and they can't keep it up. And by not putting a lot of pressure on yourself at the beginning for things to be perfect, that's gonna help you just sit down and just get in that habit of writing your blog maybe once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever you decide is the right amount for you. People always ask me, okay, well, I wanna start a blog, what should I do? And I really do just respond, you just have to start. You know, figure out what platform you wanna be on. It doesn't mean you have to stick with that forever. You can always transfer or move down the road. I started my blog on Blogger, which is a free platform through Google. And I was on that for almost 7.5 years, and then I ultimately switched to WordPress, but WordPress isn't free, so that might not be the best option for you. But look into Wix, Squarespace, Tumblr, Blogger, WordPress. Anyway, pick a platform and just sit down and start pouring your heart out. Okay, so the second tip that I have is that everyone should go into blogging with the right intention. You know, I think when you start anything in life, you should try to sit down and figure out why you're doing this and what you want your end goals to be. I think a lot of people look at bloggers or Instagrammers or YouTubers or whomever and say, oh, well, that's what I want to do. They get to travel, they get to work from home, they get all this free stuff, they get to work with all these amazing companies. And yes, it's incredible and that's such a blessing, and I'm so fortunate and grateful that I get to do that. But the number of bloggers who actually hit that level, it's so small. And a lot of the people that you're seeing who are experiencing that level have been doing this for so many years, and that means that for years and years beforehand, none of that was actually coming their way. So if you're starting with that as your intention, you're probably going to get frustrated and feel down on yourself for not hitting those goals, when in reality, it's just a long-term game. I think when you set your intention to say, I want to start a blog because I want to have a creative outlet, that's why I started my blog in the first place. Or you want to start an online portfolio of all your photographs, or you want a place with all your writing samples so that you can share that with other people, or maybe it's just for your own self and no one's gonna see it. So just start with an intention that will lead you to success. What I recommend saying is that this is just something that you want to enjoy and explore. And no matter what happens and what opportunities come down the line, as long as you're always enjoying the writing process or photographing or anything to do with blogging, as long as you're enjoying it, you're actually successful and you won't feel frustrated if you don't become a full-time blogger in a month or 6 months or a year. I didn't start full-time blogging until I had done it for I think 5 or 6 years. And I never intended on becoming a full-time blogger, so that's just kind of like a cherry on the cake. I've just always enjoyed the process of blogging, regardless of whether I'm getting paid for it or sponsored or free stuff or traveling. I've just always loved blogging, even without all those things, and I've always felt successful because of that. Once you start blogging, one of the things that I struggle with and that I hear a lot of other people struggling with is that you might have a hard time coming up with things to write about. I always say, you know, come up with what your niche is going to be and what you're going to be blogging about. Try to keep it narrow so that you have a specific take on something and that people know when they come to your blog that that's what you're going to be talking about, but also broad enough so that you still have things to talk about over time. You don't want to keep things super specific where after blogging for 6 weeks, you've just completely exhausted the list of things to blog about, but you also don't want to be so broad that you could blog about absolutely anything and your readers are going to be so confused when they come to your blog because they don't really get what you're about. So I always recommend that when you're getting your blog off the ground to sit down and try to come up with 50 blog post ideas. If you're starting a successful blog, you're going to have more than 50 blog posts over time. But I feel like that 50 number is such a sweet spot of knowing that you have tons of stuff to write about. And if you can get to 50, you can get to 100, you can get to 500, and you can get to 1,000. But if you're writing that list of things, and this, by the way, is just a list of topics, it's not that you're actually going to sit down and write those 50 posts all at once, you're just coming up with ideas. If you get to number 25 and you realize that you really have exhausted that list, maybe your blog is a little too narrow and you need to broaden the horizon just a little bit so you can get to that 50 mark. People always ask me, like, how do I keep coming up with ideas? Guys, I've been doing this every day, a blog post every single day for years. And there are times when I start to think to myself, okay, that's it, I've got to quit my blog, I don't have any more ideas, and then all of a sudden an idea will come out of nowhere. So keep that running list of things, and when you hit 50, you know you're in the sweet spot of having a niche topic without being too broad and also without being too narrow. So one way that I try to come up with ideas is just to look around me and try to get inspired by everything. What am I doing? What have I done the past week? What's something that's worrying me? What are my girlfriends and I talking about? Where am I shopping? Did I read something new in the news that I thought was interesting? I try to keep my blog like a conversation with my reader, like a conversation with a friend, because I think of my reader as a friend. So looking at what my friends and I are doing and talking about and interested in actually helps me come up with tons and almost nearly, I guess I would say, endless ideas. Okay, so this next tip is something that I wouldn't recommend 9 years ago when I was starting my blog because the blogging world was so different, but it's something that I think you really have to focus on now in 2018, and that is quality. You need to make sure that even if you're just starting out and you're still figuring things out, that you're putting out the best content that you can put out. It means the best writing, the best photography. Now, obviously you're going to get better over time and you will continue to perfect things and figure out what works for you, but don't just try to like whip something up and think that it's okay because it's the bare minimum. You know, really put in the effort to make your content great. That's what's gonna really help you stand out among other people who have been doing it for 9 years or 8 years. I see people starting blogs, they're taking photographs like at night and it's dark and it's grainy and you can't really get a good clear idea of what they are, what their personality is. And there's a striking difference between that, which just looks kind of like lackluster, versus someone who has been doing it for a long time. It has a much more polished look. So go through some of the accounts that you are really inspired by or that you think are really amazing, even if it's not the same niche as you, and then try to figure out how to get your content to be that great. Here are some pro tips. You don't need a fancy camera. You can take incredible photos and videos with your iPhone. And the key is that you just need to focus on lighting. Try to get as much natural light as possible. If natural light is impossible, try to, find a light source in the room that's going to help brighten things up and play around with it. This is supposed to be fun and it should be an experiment, and I guarantee you're gonna learn as you go, and that's part of the fun of it. But make sure you are trying to get the best content that you can when you're starting, because you're just gonna get ahead of the game that way. Okay, so yes, my last tip was about quality of content, but then my next and final tip is going to be about the quantity. And I know people often say that it's quality over quantity, but it's quality in a consistent quantity. So figure out what's gonna work for you. Now, don't try to go overboard. If you can't commit to putting up a blog post every single day, don't put up a blog post every single day. Sit down and say, I know that I can guarantee blog posts twice a week, and that's gonna be on Sundays and Wednesdays, and stick to that. So that's gonna be your quantity. It's just being consistent with how often you're posting. You don't wanna go, 60 miles an hour right at the start, and then all of a sudden, after 2 weeks of doing that, you've completely burnt yourself out and you have to take 2 weeks off. That's not gonna make someone feel enthusiastic or excited to follow you if they feel like they're not gonna get a specific amount of content. Let people know what to expect from you, and as long as you're meeting those expectations, that's gonna be enough. And then going off of that, obviously blogging is on a platform where you're gonna be able to write and share a lot of things like that, but there's also that social media component. And try to be on as many platforms as you can without losing the quality of your content. So that might mean saying, I want to blog and a YouTube channel, but I don't have time for Instagram and Twitter. Or that's saying, I definitely don't have time for YouTube, so I'm just gonna focus on my blog and Instagram and try to keep 1 tweet a day. So figure out what's gonna work for you where you're not losing the quality of your content, but that your readers know exactly what to expect from you, and that you are, keeping that hamster wheel moving, and you're not burning yourself out, but you're also not just disappearing and only coming in sporadically. Commit to a schedule and figure out what works for you. Even if that's just once a week, that's totally fine, and your readers might be so excited that you're gonna post every Monday morning, and that's how they're gonna start your week. You don't have to be blogging every day, so don't think that, quantity just completely overrides everything else. It's a balance, and it's more of an art than a science in figuring out what works for you, so your readers are happy at the end of the day. So if you liked these tips, I'm going to leave 2 blog posts that I've recently written on my blog with tons of tips. So these were kind of top level tips, and then in the blog post I go into more detail if you have more questions, or maybe you started a blog recently but you just want to dive a little deeper. Those 2 blog posts are going to help you a lot. I spent a lot of time putting them together, and everything is free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't think you should buy blogging tips from anyone. The content is out there in the world. So I just put my 2 cents, and I tried to answer as many frequently asked questions as I get in those. So start there if you are more interested in starting a blog. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.